Hey guys, what's going on? Shaw here, and today I just wanted to do a little showcasing of something I've been working on. I normally don't really make this kind of thing public. It's actually an Excel document, or Google Sheets I guess, that breaks down the entire loot table for Mythic Plus, specifically for tanks currently. I've been teetering with the idea of maybe adding everything, but I'm a tank main, so what I normally do is I make these kind of lists and sheets at the start of an expansion when I know the dungeon pool, and I utilize this to easily search for gear and to also craft or draft a best in slot list for my tanks for each season. So I just kind of wanted to talk about exactly what the sheet entails and how I use it, and yeah, just kind of nerd out. So to me, the sheet isn't necessarily done yet. There's still a lot that I need to add. Things like links. I want to get into some sim data first. Also, there's a kind of an issue with the new dungeon pool being like Court of Stars and Halls of Valor don't necessarily have a defined loot table yet because, well, there's a ton of loot in there, a lot of weird sets and a lot of interesting trinkets that were really strong back in the day, and we don't know exactly what Blizzard's going to add there or remove. And same with things like Shadowmoon Burial Ground. In Season 4 of Shadowlands, we weren't able to actually see what the loot table was. A lot of people were kind of speculating on those rings, for example, that had main stat on them and how they would be maybe probably your best in slot. Really strong, but Blizzard ended up not adding them. So there's a few things that are kind of in the unknown right now, and as soon as we do know that, I will add them to the sheet as well. I also mentioned that like best in slot lists, for example, those will be typically available for my Twitch supporters and Patreon supporters in the future. So if you want to support the channel and have access to lists that are created for you to know exactly what you need to target for each season, just, yeah, you can check those links out down below. So what's going on here? There's going to be a read first tab. If you do happen to open up the document, it will be in the description below. But what I've done is I've just kind of organized everything the way that I like it into these different tabs. So we have things like leather gear, we have our plate gear. Both of these tabs actually do include back pieces in both, same with like rings and necklaces down towards the bottom. They are just essentially duplicated, but all of the other gear is specific to either leather or plate depending on your tab. So for example, if you are a demon hunter tank or a monk tank, you would want to probably look at the leather tab, and then on the kind of the flip side, if you're a blood DK or warrior paladin or whatever, you would look at this sheet to kind of know. How I utilize this sheet is by, let's just say, okay, there is a specific breakpoint that I want to hit for my blood DK. Let's say I want X amount of haste. I need to kind of figure out what haste gear I need. So I would Control F, type in haste. This will then bring up every item that has haste on it throughout all of these dungeons, as well as the inspiration catalyst, which we'll have access to in the future. And now I know exactly what items I need to target. If I want legs, for example, I can be like, okay, the Naku defensive, but I also have to keep in mind tier. So kind of goes back and forth there, but I need haste on my boots. Which boots have heavier haste? The heavier haste or the heavier secondary stat will always be on the left hand side, with the kind of lighter stat weight being on the right hand side. Didn't really care about splits, so I didn't calculate these stat weights because, again, there's also gear from different item levels, right? So if you get something from an M0 compared to, you know, hitting, 2K or 2500 or whatever the IO is going to be to upgrade to max, those values are going to change a little bit. But for the most part, now we know that, okay, this has heavy haste, and then this item here has lighter haste and heavier critical strike. So you can kind of figure out exactly what stats you want. Where this really comes important, though, is once you hit that breakpoint. So, okay, I hit my haste breakpoint. Maybe I want to look for something that has just mastery on it. And then you can see, okay, these are the items that have mastery. And of course, then you also can kind of filter through and figure out like, oh, this one has haste on it still, even with mastery. So I can ignore that. Maybe I want to go for this cloak or these hands, for example. You're going to see a lot of TBDs in here. These are those dungeons that we're not exactly sure of, things like Hall's Court of Stars. And I didn't include any loot from Shadowmoon Burial Grounds because the loot pools back then, for those who aren't aware, were kind of all synonymous with each other, meaning that you can get the same exact helm from both Shadowmoon Burial Grounds, Grimroyal Depot, the Auchindoun or whatever it was called. So they kind of had this giant shared loot table, and we don't know how Blizzard is going to kind of narrow those down. And once they do, and once we have that knowledge, I will definitely be adding them to the sheet. If you have a suggestion on how I can improve this sheet, that would be good. I just really like having everything kind of in one spot instead of, you know, opening up the dungeon journal and like having to manually click through each dungeon, and kind of the search functions through there are kind of weak because you can't really search by secondary stat as much as I'm aware of. Hence why I've created this document. So that's kind of how it works. And of course I have weapons divided as well. So you can see, okay, I'm a Death Knight. These are the weapons that I have access to from dungeons. I do have the Shadow Moon Burial Ground. I'm assuming that the polearm will be available from there, but no other tanks really have a weapon outside of maybe the hand axe from Temple of the Jade Serpent. But you can see like, okay, druids only have 2 items here. I'm a demon hunter. Here are the warglaive / axe and sword I'm available to. I also have some noted items in here. For example, Storm Slash, similar to Puck Storm back in Shadowlands, has an actual additional effect to it. So if there's additional effects to items, I've actually put them in here. Same with Strike Twice. For your plate tanks or your strength tanks, those will come from Naku Defensive. And then of course I have trinkets. I don't know what to do with trinkets exactly, if I'm being honest. I have the effect in here as well as the stat. I'm thinking about adding like simulations and or what type of trinket they necessarily are. For example, you have Granite's Enduring Scale. This is more of a defensive trinket that applies armor and then will erupt for physical damage once the shield breaks or expires. So that's something that I have to look into. I'm not exactly sure what to do with the trinket page yet, but those are here as well. Agility, there aren't a lot of agility specific trinkets that I noticed. That was kind of interesting. And then I've added the inspiration catalyst. This is actually the first thing I did. And for those who want to read a little bit about it, I do have more information here. But I'm probably going to end up redoing this sheet a little bit in the near future. And then for those who are curious or interested, I do have the full entire loot table added for tanks specifically. This is mostly going to include your plate and leather gear, your general items, as well as trinkets, and kind of like quick synopsis, whatever, of each trinket, as well as kind of what they're specialized for, which classes. This master list, this is what I was kind of talking about. For example, like Halls of Valor has literally every item in it, and most of them are crit mastery based, which is just kind of odd to me. I'd imagine that they would probably pull back on some of these items so the loot table isn't super big. If you look down here, there's actually 149 lines. You can obviously subtract like a couple of these in here. So there are just a ton of items available in the loot table for Season 1. So things like, oh, and that's not including Shadow Moon Burial Grounds. I have like nothing in here. There's a ton of gear from it though. So we kind of have to see on these legacy based dungeons. But yeah, that's pretty much a breakdown of the sheets. I hope this is useful for some people, but all of the information is available here. I also have my Discord. If you're not a part of that community already, I'd recommend joining it. It's just kind of a Mythic Plus centric Discord, but this is also how you can get in contact with me if you have any questions or comments about the sheet, maybe things I can add, things you would like to see. I'm gonna leave a comment down below saying like, what's up, non-tank losers? If this comment gets like, I don't know, if that comment gets like 400 likes, I can add, or I will add, cloth and mail gear to this table to make it more for everyone instead of just tanks. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown. The link for this document will be down below. Huge shout out to all my Patreons and Twitch subscribers. Those are the people who are allowing me to kind of make content like this more regularly and consistently, and I'm just having a blast doing so. So if you'd like to support me over there, go check them out. I hope you guys are all staying happy, healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.